Hello and welcome to the Overwhelm is Optional podcast. I'm Heidi, Marke, coach and biggest cheerleader for successful but secretly overwhelmed women. As well as weekly episodes here on the podcast, you can find out more about what I offer by going to heidimarke.co.uk. Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Overwhelm is Optional podcast. I have a really special guest with me today. I'm so excited. It's taken me a while to convince Miles to come on a podcast because for some of us it can be scary and I'm okay with that. So I'm really grateful for Miles' generosity in being here today. He is a fellow rebel in his own way. He's actually a Manchester, UK based coach and trainer who teaches the Getting Things Done methodology. So getting things done is a trademark term, but we're just going to talk about it our way. It's a comprehensive way of managing work and life that helps you get things done more quickly, more easily, and with a lot less stress. So obviously it's completely appropriate to you guys, to my lovely, lovely listeners. So welcome, Miles. It's so lovely to have you here.
Thank you very much. Good to be here.
Okay,
despite the nerves, yes.
Despite the nerves, yeah. Oh, it's a magical thing being here. Everybody who's been nervous has afterwards said, "Oh, that was really nice." So I'm hoping that it will be a similar experience for you. So I'm going to start with the question I always ask my guests: tell me about your adventures in Overwhelm.
Right. Well, that question. I wasn't quite sure where to start with it, and I'm sure you, being you, could kind of framed that and thought about it in quite a cunning way to let people do interesting things with it. And I could talk about Overwhelm being about the work, but it actually got me thinking about a whole bunch of other things. Into the word, and I think it was the word adventure that did it. Because I thought, where did the adventure start? And normally, if I'm, doing any kind of promotional type talks with people, I usually start the adventure, in about 2004 when I discovered GTD. But for some reason, your question, it just got me thinking, well, what happened before that?
Oh, I love this.
What happened before that? And so I think the adventure. I was thinking about this just earlier when I was making coffee. I think my first experience of Overwhelm was also my first kind of memory. It was being a bit rebellious, actually, eating something that I was told specifically not to eat, which was a chili pepper. And it was on a tree. It was at a tree in the backyard in Cyprus, and that was my first memory because it was a pretty explosive experience. It was not a good thing to do when you're about 6 years old or something. That was the first sort of experience with Overwhelm. But I guess what got me thinking about that kind of period of time was what is it that actually drew me to this work in Overwhelm? Because GTD is about stress and overwhelm. I mean, those are the two things we talk about. And it's often shorthand for the people that we're trying to help. They're stressed and overwhelmed. That's generally what it is. Yeah. But I was thinking, well, what is it that drew me to it and why? And I started to realize that I think if I kind of really go back into my past, there were quite a few different things that made me into somebody who likes to be in control of things. Not in a really, I don't think in a really, I don't know, really in a really sort of frozen, rigid OCD, too scared to move kind of way. But really, it's the rebellion thing. I think it's wanting to be more in control of your world than other people are in control of you, which is why when you said that word rebellious, when we came on, I thought, oh yeah, I like that word. That's a good start. Yeah. That's exactly how I see this work. And one of the things was, growing up as the child of two people who were in the forces, living in Cyprus and living in places like Singapore. And I think you've talked to anybody who's had that kind of background. It's not that stable, because you never really know where you're going to live.
Yes.
And that was particularly true in Cyprus, actually, because we were living there when the war broke out between the Greeks and the Turks. So one of my other early memories was being driven to the airport and having to duck in the back of the car with bullets flying, and be bundled back into the back of a Hercules C-130 to be kind of evacuated to Britain. And so, it was all part of that. So I kind of had this start in life, which was, it wasn't that sort of stable, I suppose. And when you and mixed into that, what you can see, which your listeners probably can't see, is that I'm mixed race, and that is an interesting thing as well, because that sort of also adds in, who am I? Where do I belong? That's just a life. Like anyone who's, I think, mixed race will tell you that. Yeah, that's part of your sort of background, part of your personality, is trying to figure that out.
Yeah.
And then later on in life, another big formative thing was going to a public school. And my experience of going to a public school was sort of having my entire family drive me to the public school and then go off to the airport and go to the other side of the world. And I think that was quite a formative thing as well. So it all sort of mixes up together, I think, to explain why I'm somebody who likes to be more in control than not, and who works in the way that I do, works finding it really important to help other people who, for whatever reason, are not really in control of their world. That just really kind of resonates with me. And that's a huge thing now. It's a huge thing in the world we work in the world we live in, because a lot of people, for lots of different reasons, but especially to do with the way that people work, they just are really struggling and they're not really in control of things. So, I really relate to that. And I always sort of, it's kind of what gets me up in the morning, and it's what makes the work so rewarding, to know that you can help people with that. So I'm not going to use the word control freak, because I think it's a maligned word, but I do think it's important to be in control. And another part of it actually was, so I'm mixed race. My dad came from Trinidad. I don't even know if Trinidad was a little island in the Caribbean, and he's not with us now, but his generation that kind of came up in the Windrush years, they were kind of the subjects of the British Empire. So on the one hand, they had this real kind of belief that Britain was going to fulfill all their dreams, and they had a sort of aspirations that Britain had given them, which is why they kind of would even consider sending kids to public school. But on the other hand, when they got here and realized that they had to kind of make their own way, you tend to find that people who are immigrants are very kind of self-driven, very motivated, and they have a really strong thing about, like, you have to look out for yourself. You have to be in control, because actually, as an immigrant, you don't really feel that necessarily you're part of something where other people are there for you, supporting you. So you find this in a lot of immigrant communities, that there is a very strong sort of drive to achievement and self-determination. So that's all part of it as well. So yeah, I think that the control side of things, the rebel side of things. Believe it or not, Trinidad per capita is a place that generates more rebels in this world than many other places that you can think of. A lot of the people who are in the Black Panther movement in America had family who were from Trinidad, or they came from Trinidad. And it's a very kind of rebellious place, you tend to find. And Jamaica tends to dominate in the Caribbean, and people tend to assume that people come from Jamaica if they're quite high profile, but you find Trinidad generated a lot of rebels. And oddly enough, by no coincidence, look, I got my Trinidad t-shirt on. There you go. So that's a weird coincidence, but if it means anything. So yeah, the adventure started quite a long time ago for me. I think those are the kind of experiences that made me who I was. And then just throughout the period of my first career was working in English teaching in Japan. And I started to gravitate towards this sort of lifestyle then. My happiest year there was working from home once we had the internet and email. Then I came back here, worked in a university. Again, a really good place for people who don't like being told what to do, and and, and that was where I discovered Getting Things Done, or GTD, and that started to grow, and I just started to actually become a trainer and a coach of it, even though that wasn't my role or anything that the university was paying me for. That's when I started to do it. I just started to become really interested in it. And yeah, cut a long story short, I ended up bailing out of the university sector a number of years later, and that's what I do now. So that's probably way too long, but so
that was amazing.
That's kind of how I got here.
No, that's the one of the most interesting and fascinating and exciting. I just want to go wow, because we know each other from various things, and I didn't know most of that about you. So wow, yeah, how exciting. What an adventure. And now I love that how you've taken all of that and not only made it into very meaningful work, which quite literally does change people's lives. I can speak to that from my experience of being coached by you in GTD. But also you're just so smiley with it. I mean, you just told some actually very quite difficult things about your childhood, and yet you're kind of you're using them in this really rebellious way, and it's just, I love it. I love what you've done. I love that adventure. Wow, thank you so much for sharing that. I'm blown away by that story. Why are you not writing a book about that? I mean, come on, that's a cool life story there.
Well, that's an interesting question. I've never thought there would be enough material for a book or enough interest. But no, it's interesting that I think look, people will have experience of this, that when you sit down and you think about how you got to where you are,
yes,
sometimes you realize that it's, what do they call it, retrospective sense making. You look back and although you never really had a plan, when you look back, you can almost see that there's a natural evolution, although there was never any plan at all.
yeah.
But now a lot of my work is sort of working one-to-one virtually with people, and I was already starting to just want to do that around way back when the internet came in. As soon as it was there, I just thought, I could work at home. I can be wherever I want. That's just been driving me for many, many years, and I had no idea I'd get to do this, and to really, I remember the moment I discovered GTD. I can just remember the room I was in, and I can almost remember clicking on the web page because I knew what it was, and I'd had these dreams of being able to be self-employed and work remotely from wherever I wanted to. I just had that all sort of bubbling under for years, and then I can remember the moment when I clicked on a web page, and it brought up the page of the company that I'm now working for, and there was a tab and it said careers. And you know how in some films when something happens, there's that technique they use in movies for the moment of realization, when the camera sort of zooms in on your face. That was the moment, and I thought, oh my God, this is possible. Somebody does this. And it's taken a long while to get from there to here, but it's nice to really and I'm sure you think the same about this, to finally just be doing something which is just so great and so good, and it's just so you that you'd probably do it for free, even if it wasn't your business. Yes. And I know you feel that way about what you do as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. It's like, it is that sudden, but not sudden, isn't it? To me, it's that. So I really get to do this. I get to work from home and I get to help people, which to me is absolutely my driving force. To make a positive difference in the world, but to still be myself, and I like being at home, and and I guess previously my way of working was thinking I had to push myself out into the world in a way that exhausted me, whereas now I can do it in a gentle, rebellious way, finding my way of doing it. And that knowing your why. And I love what you said about that kind of recollective sense making. Did you call it retrospective? Yeah, that story that seems to intertwine. It's almost like there's something inside of us that will keep nudging us, that makes our heart sing,
Mm.
And the experiences we go through prepare us for it, give us it's more the knowledge and skills, isn't it? It's this deep understanding. I guess it gives us empathy or something. It's like, so all the people I work with, I can feel because I've been there without having, but there's no intellectual assumption that my story is the same as theirs. It's deeper than that. It's just a genuine connection and saying, oh yeah, you're who I can help. Would you like to come over here and work with me? It's that invitation. It's delicious, isn't it? That kind of like, oh, we really get to do this. Like I get to, have control over my life. And it's interesting that you call it control, because I almost feel like it's the opposite of control, but it is control. It's choice. It's freedom.
Yeah, I think they're flip sides of the same coin, really.
Yes.
Freedom and control,
Yeah.
and we talk a lot about that in this work. Is that a lot of the people who most gravitate towards GTD are people who are kind of freedom people. They really are into they are into just having no really barriers between them and doing what they most like doing, and they just want to know how to do more of it. And
Yes.
but you have to have the control in order to achieve the freedom.
Yeah. For me,
And
it's that whole Zen thing of structure versus freedom. So when I did my yoga teacher training, it was really strict, as Zen is, very, very strict. And then there's this hidden thing about that, which is the opposite. So there's a thing called Rado, which is spontaneous yoga. But to do spontaneous yoga, you have to have done the really strict, like really strict Zen stuff of sitting for hours, of doing deep yoga work, really strict, like
I can imagine
that rigid thing of like, now I'm just ready to rebel, I've had enough, stop making me do this. And then suddenly that you discover this opposite, which is hidden, very hidden, Rado, which is this most beautiful, spontaneous, healing, energizing form of movement, which might even just be stillness. So it has no definition. I don't have words for it, which is obviously very Zen. There's no words for it. It's like the opposite. So you've got the structure versus freedom. And for me, I had the same experience with meditating, where you do the very strict sitting, but actually the point of the sitting is not to become good at sitting. It's to be able to move through your day from a place of awareness and connection. And you only get that from the structure. And what threw me with GTD is I thought GTD was all about structure and restriction. I'd misinterpreted it by not. I guess when I was in the middle of, training myself for burnout, and I'd got better at doing stuff. So I thought, well, I'm going to hack my productivity so I don't feel so overwhelmed, so I can get my life back. When I did that, what I did was take productivity tools that allowed me to do more and basically kill myself faster. And because I misinterpreted, also because I guess GTD, I don't know, the stuff I came across, to me, I didn't interpret in the way you're interpreting it. You saw it as freedom. I saw it as control, and I didn't like it. I didn't like the structure of it. But when you started talking about it, and when you described it to me, I was like, really? Oh my God, this is it. And it was such a revelation. And when we worked together on setting up for me, and it's that there's the words in itself, setting it up for me. And that is the whole, as you know, that's my whole concept. The gentle rebellion is you find your way of doing it by tuning into what you want, by knowing yourself better. It's self-awareness practice in order to get things done. So for me, what I've done is take, well, with your support, when you coach me through it, suddenly it's like, so I just get all this freedom. Wow, I never knew that. I thought it was the
I remember.
opposite. Yeah, it was huge for me. I'd really love if you could share more about how you work, what it is you do now, a bit more about that, because it can sound like the opposite, and it is the route to freedom, I believe.
Yeah, it can sound like the opposite, and I think people do come to it with people who know a little bit about it do come to it sometimes with misconceptions that it's kind of it's all about lists. You hear that a lot.
Yes. Yeah.
But no, you didn't. You shed those quite quickly, I remember, and you tuned into the whole freedom element very, very quickly. And actually, once you'd had a few realizations, I think it became obvious to you that it was exactly the right thing for you.
Yeah.
And yeah, you just sort of tuned into that frequency really quickly, because yes, you can, and a lot of people do. And I mean, there's a whole industry out there of tools which are being used poorly. It's like, swords and plowshares. You can use the tools for good, and you can use them to sort of beat yourself up and just try and think that it's going to force you to do more. And there's a whole world of people out there who want you to do that.
Yes.
There's money in that.
I say it's related to the whole, what I see as toxic well-being industry within organizations, where you add in well-being in order to get people to last a bit longer before they crack. And it doesn't work, does it? This whole, we have that we expect you to overwork and go past all of your sound boundaries, and then we'll scoop you up with a day a quarter, which is a well-being day. It's an utter nonsense, which is why, I think I'm unemployable like you anyway. I don't want to be in that anymore. I don't wish to be in an organization. I love to do it my way like you do. But also, for me, if I choose to work in a company, I have to be really strict about, but this is how I work, because otherwise I can't go in and say I can help your staff, be less overwhelmed, unless the person above really gets what that means and what's going to happen. And it's going to cause a rebellion. It's going to be better overall, but you have to get where I'm coming from. You can't just decide that you bring this in order that then you go, well, we've ticked the well-being box. They should be less stressed now. They should be able to work longer. They should be able to cope with more pressure, because that's not what resilience is. And it's a nonsense. So I've got to the stage rebelliously where I don't even want to teach. I could teach loads of stress management techniques, but I won't, unless you come and actually work with me one-to-one and sort the underlying causes of the overwhelm and pressure first. Then I'll give you, I'll hold, like, inside my group program, I've held sudden surprise. Right, we're going to do like a workshop on just wrapping you up in lovely, lovely self-care. But that's secret. That's not what I'm advertising myself as, because I know from personal experience how we can misuse all of these things, and that we need to look at the underlying, the deep meaning of it. Why do you want to get more productive? Why do you want to get more stuff done? Why do you want to get rid of your stress? Why do you want to feel less overwhelmed? Because if it's in order to just literally push yourself even harder, I will have no part in that.
Yeah. I think few companies, they need to be pretty brave to be able to engage with you in that kind of kind of dialogue.
Absolutely.
Which is why this stuff often works well when you're working one-to-one with individuals, because the fact that they're there with you suggests that they've already gotten to a point where it's no longer about them trying to persuade themselves. They know that they've gone beyond it, so you don't necessarily have to have that kind of dialogue again. But it's brave stuff to be in a company that is a vehicle that's designed to do what it does and answer to shareholders and so on, to be able to have that kind of conversation.
I've only worked with small entrepreneurial. If you get companies when they're smaller and at the beginning, it's possible. But in general, I work one-to-one for exactly the same reason: is that it's more complicated. It's harder to hold space for people within a structure where you don't have that kind of power. Whereas what I really like the idea of is that if you work one-to-one with somebody who's at the top of the company, then it's going to change things. That I think is key. And I think that for me, that's been quite a journey, realizing that actually I thought, because when I started on my journey, I thought, well, if I do lower price courses that I can bring groups of people together, that will have the greatest impact. Whereas what I've learned is, no, if you work with people at a higher kind of level who have a lot of responsibility, that's faster. I mean, both ways are good and valuable, but for me, that power of working with somebody who wants to do things differently, like you're saying, who's had that realization, is now just saying, right, show me how, teach me, show me.
Yeah, it tends to be one of the most common ways of that our work sort of spreads, is because you get that person who's quite senior, and somebody else tells them, somebody else tells them about GTD, and it's probably somebody who's similar to them, because I'm not similar to them, but somebody else will be similar to them who's experienced it, who's done something with it, who's felt some benefit from it, who's sort of recognizing it in one of their peers, and they tell them about it. But you're right, it's great when you know you're going to have the opportunity to work with somebody who can just subsequently influence their whole organization. And it might take quite a long time. You could be talking several years before it happens. But once people get GTD, then they tend to, it tends to stay with them.
Yes.
It tends to stay with them because it can have such an impact on them that inevitably, they start to tell other people about it. And often, as a result of what they've done, they become the people who are in those positions, because they can just do the jobs better, and they surface later down the tracks, and they've jumped to another company, or now they've got a team and they've got a budget, and so it's nice to work with people one to one. Our work does tend to be quite corporate. We are geared up for the corporate market, so it's a bit different from what you do, but at its heart, it's us working one to one with people. Probably helping them as people rather than working to some corporate agenda, but it still works because it helps them.
Yes, it is actually very personal. I found it very, as you say, I was already like, for me it was fast because we're coming from a similar philosophy of life and way of working anyway. What you did was help me. You majorly up-leveled how I worked. So I already kind of had stuff, and then you came along and just like blew it out of the water with it's almost like a permission thing. I think that's what it was. So I was already kind of doing a lot of things, but it was messy. And what it's enabled me to do is it's just, I am hilarious now, because I'll just say, yeah, but that's not what my mind's for. No. I don't carry that kind of stuff in my mind anymore, even to and it's also confidence, actually. It gave me a lot of confidence I remember before, because I am an academic, because I have studied, and because I always loved research and reading and having the facts at my fingertips, obscure facts that most people just genuinely don't want to know. Like I was a research geek, and I could quote stuff, whereas now I can't quote anything, and I don't care. And it doesn't, because I don't need to be able to justify my argument. Now I'll just say, well, that's not how I do things, because I don't wish to carry that in my mind. I was carrying a lot of information in my mind. That kind of thing about, I know a lot of my clients have, and I used to have this thing like, I ought to read that book. And then you end up with this stack of books by your bed, although now that will be stacked inside your Kindle. And then these books that you were passionate about reading, that you were really excited to read, suddenly become something heavy that you ought to read. They go onto I ought to read that book list. And now I don't have that, because now I know that, well, for a start, I already have a ton of wisdom and information and knowledge, and I can live like for the rest of my life. If I didn't read, there's still enough joy and richness anyway. But I love to read, but I don't need to store it in my head. So the ability to say, I don't know, I read that, but I don't know, I have no idea who wrote it, I can't quote you it correctly, I'm going to do it messily, not because I refuse to carry. Basically, you taught me to rebel against carrying stuff in my mind. My mind's not available to carry stuff in it. It's not fit for that. That's not what it does. That's not how it works best. So now everything's outsourced. And because you taught me that outsourcing, that finding safe container, for me, it was about safety and trust. So setting up a system where I know that everything will get done that needs to get done, because it's captured. It's safely captured. And it's the safety. We can let go of stuff out of our mind when it's safe.
Well, if you've got a lot of stuff in your mind and it's just making you feel guilty, if it's just keeps reminding you about all the potential things that you could be doing and that you ought to be doing and so on, then it's actually working against you. It's not helping you. And since that is entirely where you live, 100% of the time, how uncomfortable is that?
Yeah.
You know,
Just
and,
sat there
and it's
listening to this repeat loop of
yeah.
nagging. Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of people just do live in this constant loop of feeling bad about something, or feeling some kind of shame that they're not doing this, not doing that, and where does this come from? I mean, part of it is not knowing a better way to interact with the world, and part of it is the world deliberately wanting to make people feel like that as well, because there's money in it.
Yes.
There's money in wellness, for example. So yeah, I think we have the same view that for the people that we try and help, and for anybody out there, there's a lot that they're fighting against, and in some ways the world is sort of conspiring against people, and we're kind of we're fighting against that.
Yes.
In as much as we can, by doing the different things that we do.
Yeah. It's that we are freedom fighters, rebelling against this constant need to do more and be better and feel rubbish about yourself and feel overloaded. And
I have a secret secret desire that one day on my LinkedIn profile, where it says something like guiding senior leaders guiding senior leaders and teams towards stress-free productivity with GTD. Okay, and it's been like that for quite a while now. But I have this secret ambition that one day I'm just going to change it, and it's just going to say freedom fighter.
You should do it just for a day and see what happens.
Nothing will happen. I don't think. I just like that. I don't know what people will make of it, but I think that's absolutely. I mean, we're doing it in different ways, but I think we are part of that same tradition of wanting to help make people's lives better, because a lot of what people put up with for no fault of their own is unfair.
Yes.
And they shouldn't be experiencing it. And if they just had the information that we have been lucky enough to find, then it doesn't need to be that way. And so you and I, we both mostly just trying to share information as much as possible, because we know it makes people's lives better. And we're not having to take up weapons, but we're kind of freedom fighters nonetheless for that reason.
Yeah. I love
what could be a better job than that?
Exactly. What could be better? Just dropping little rebellious seeds here and here and here.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that. I love that. I love that entire summing up of the work we do. Thank you for that. Have you got a top tip for my listeners?
I did think about that. It's hard for me not to go straight to the top tip that was the same question that was asked of David Allen, actually, because we've not mentioned him, but David Allen is the guy. He was an American writer who created the Getting Things Done methodology. Yeah, and he did a lot of work over several decades, actually, working with coaching and so on, and GTD was his sort of synthesis. It's a complete. We haven't said much about it, but it's a complete way of working. All right, it's all the best practices honed and refined and so on, and that's basically what GTD is. He created it, and when he was asked, what's the one thing that you would tell people, he just said, write things down more. And that absolutely makes sense when you understand what GTD is, because the the core principle of GTD, as you've sort of alluded, is your mind's for having ideas and not holding them. And the core of a lot of the different kinds of problems that people have around overwhelm and stress is because they are using their mind for things that their mind's not very good at, trying to remember everything, track everything. And that might have worked well 100 years ago, but in the age of the internet and all of these tools and digital media and iPhones, it's killer. It's literally killing people, having to live in that state of hyperdrive in terms of their brain and their attention. So the core idea of GTD is your mind's having ideas, not holding them. So what basically, when you teach people GTD, you are teaching them a number of different steps and processes in their workflow that have the combined effect of helping them to live in a busy life, meet all their commitments, do all the things that they need to do, but to do it without having to tax their brain to do a lot of the actual work. So you described it as outsourcing. So people who implement GTD, they set up they'll choose a tool that they want to do it with. They'll set up the lists, and then they start this process of getting things out of their head. And then there's a whole bunch of other stuff that comes after that. But the first thing that you have to do in order to make that work, the biggest lever to making that work, is that you've got to get it out first. So when people implement GT, one of the first things that you start doing with them is just let's get as much as possible out of your head. We have that thing called the mind sweep, so that exercise to help them get people out of their head, and then you teach them how to have tools that help them to capture thoughts quickly, so that they're not sort of rattling around in their head. And then the rest follows. More follows after that, which is around what you then do with it and how you organize it in a system and how you review it and how you prioritize. And there's a bunch more. I mean, it's a comprehensive way of working. But without that first step, it undermines everything else. So the first thing that you have to do, and if you boiled it down to what's the one thing, if you could only tell a person one thing, that would be it. Write things down more, because then you are taking a big step in the right direction. And it may well be that you've still got lots of piles of stuff and you may not know the rest about what to do with it, but you'll feel a whole lot better if it's just not in your head. And that's the one thing, which sounds, it sounds kind of superficial and easy, but it does kind of get to the heart of what the problem is. So that would be the one thing. Write it down more.
Thank you. And that completely resonates, because obviously overwhelm is optional. For me, it's always deal with the overwhelm first. And to me, the overwhelm is in your head. It's the overloading of the mind. It's the misuse of the mind, because we haven't been taught we haven't been taught how to look after and use our minds, basically. And that's step one of get it out of your head, write it down. And I remember when we started working together and I had those non-sticky post-it notes, whatever they're called. Yeah. And I put them in every room of the house.
You really got off on those, didn't you?
I did. Yeah. Just get it out. And now I think they're in only probably in 3 rooms of the house, because then I learned that actually there are 4 places, but this is really interesting reflecting on this now, that I use them a lot less. So at the beginning of the process, I was like constantly getting stuff out of my head. Whereas now I'm like, it's just out of my head already, because I refuse to keep it in my head. It doesn't, this stuff, this is really good. But like, it must be about a year later, I'm thinking, yeah, this stuff isn't in my head anymore. So
I think you already had that instinct to capture things more, because that's what it's called. That is part of something in GT that you call capture. But I think you already had that, because the thing that I remember most about first working with you wasn't the block pads; it was the shoebox. And you talked about your shoebox.
Yeah.
It's overflowing like the magic porridge pot. And it's a shoebox. But and I thought that was interesting, and it didn't take much to just sort of connect that to sort of figure out what to do about that and how to treat that, and then you were kind of off and running. But the fact that you had it shows that a lot of those instincts to capture stuff and write more stuff down and so on, it was already there. It was just a case of making some adjustments to actually make it all kind of join up together and to take away the bottleneck.
You make it sound so easy now, but at the time it felt quite difficult. It felt like he wants me to do this, so although it made sense, it was like, but you're making me change things, because we resist this change, don't we? But I'm just laughing now actually about the shoebox, because I'm in the process of having another, it's autumn, it's time for letting go. I'm clearing my office out, I'm going to decorate my office, and I've actually just moved the shoebox. So, and whenever I do anything with the shoebox, I think of you. And I've actually moved it from on top and visible to inside a drawer, because it was irritating me. And I've realized that the shoebox exists to make me feel safe, but that I don't use it in the correct way. Now, and when I say correct way, I know this is not true, because I know the point of GTD is that you make the rules and then you set it up for you. But I've noticed that I've changed how I use it, and that I rarely use it in that kind of sweeping it out. It's a safety box. And I love it there, it being that it works. Everything works for me. Like, I get masses done with ease. But I love the way I've kind of, if I reflected on what we set up, how I've developed it, and broken structures in order to create better structures for me now. And it's that.
It evolves.
It evolves. And I love that. I love that it is truly about freedom, that it's not about saying, Miles said you're supposed to do this every week and you haven't done it. At the beginning, that was true. If I didn't do the things that I was learning, it did break the system temporarily. And then we explored that, and having that one-to-one support, that's what makes the difference. Whereas now, it's like, no, I get it, because I know the purpose, I know myself, I know it's the self-awareness to say, is everything working for me? Am I feeling overwhelmed by everything I have to do? How can I make it easy? Well, I already have all the skills and tools. All I have to do is make them work better. And
it's evolved for you over time. You often see that the people implement GTD, and they get some kind of benefits quite early on, but it never stops evolving.
yeah.
And when at one point your shoebox was irritating you, so you didn't have freedom, because you were having to think about it, and it was generating irritation. But over time, you've eventually found a place for it which you're comfortable with, and there's this thing in GTD about organization at its heart being where something matches its meaning to you. So I would guess that wherever the shoebox is now, it completely matches how you think about it, and therefore there's no more irritation. And you're trying to get that through a lot of different aspects of refining GTD techniques over time. You get up and running quickly, but the refinement goes on forever. But it's moving more and more towards a state where everything just completely matches the way that you think about it, and there is no friction at all once you reach that state. And it's lovely when you recognize that. Yeah.
Oh, I do recognize that now. And it's really interesting, because for me, it's actually about deep self-acceptance. It's like, oh, so this is who I am. This is how I work. So I'm actually quite messy. I love paper. I love writing. And I end up with piles of paper on my desk, which I was trying to clear. And now I've stopped, because that's how I work. That's my outsourced brain, because I'm very creative. And as we did talk about near the end of our time working together, was this idea that how can you achieve lots of projects at once, lots of, we talked about somebody who was writing lots of books at once. So I am that person who wants to do everything, like, the big, hold lots of creative. So I've got my I'm editing a book at the moment, but already the next 2 books are pushing at this book. And yet, so for me, what the gift you gave me was how can I hold all of that without getting into a sense of overwhelm? How do I hold it? Where's the space? Because it can't stay in my head. Because there's no room for 3 books in my head. By definition, that's like madness. So it's having the safe places to go, right, there's that project there. Now I'm flowing. It's a state of flowing, and now I'm over here. Because this is held while I'm doing that. That's safe. And because it's safe, my mind goes, let's say, you don't need to think about it. Like, thinking about it's not necessary. It's this soothingness of my mind. It's okay, mind, that's safe. That's going to happen. There may be a hiccup at the moment. It may be delayed. That's because here this project. And I love that. I love that ability to hold a lot of really delicious creative things that before were getting stuck because I couldn't get them out into the world.
It's that phrase you used there about self-acceptance. I think that's an interesting one, and it reminds me of a thing that a colleague of mine says, which is that GTD confronts you with reality, and I think there's a lot of truth in that, because when you see people who are just constantly struggling to do more than they're capable of doing, they're not accepting reality. And they're still trying to work against it, and it's taking its toll on them, and eventually it will take its toll, in very unhealthy ways. And so one of the things that you often see when you're working with people in GTD is they're going through this process of coming to terms with what reality looks like and how much of it they can actually take on. And it's only by getting things out of their head so that they can actually see them that they're able to do that. Their brain is not really good at that because it just can't see the entirety of it. But when they start to work in a way that they get things out of their head, then they can see what's really going on. It enables them to cope with it better, but it also enables them to actually accept the fact that they're one person and they can only work on one book. And it's no good them beating themselves up about the fact that there are others there. They have to accept that and have a way of managing that in terms of the system and so on. But there is a part of this which is about just learning to accept what it is to be human in a world where there's a lot of stuff coming at you. There's more stuff being asked of you than you could probably deliver. There always will be. But you've got to have a way of dealing with that. Otherwise, it will crush you, It'll crush you under the wheels. And it comes back to the rebellion thing, because potentially it leads people down some paths where they have no choice, but they have to rebel. They realize that they're in this situation where they are slowly heading towards, a burnout or whatever. And the only thing that they can do at some level and in some way is to rebel against that. And you sort of see that in many ways. I've worked with people who changed jobs, quit jobs, and found that what they thought was initially going to be around some time management hacks has actually been quite profound and challenging for them, because it's made them go places that they just didn't have the headspace to see, and which the world was happily encouraging them not to be able to see, because it's in the world's interest that this person keeps rocking up to work and working 12 hours a day and so on. And the world wants you to be like that. The world wants you to just keep on sucking up Facebook and checking your emails and so on. And part of the getting out of that is to accept that you're human. You can't live like that. And but part of being human is that you can do something about it as well.
Yes, you do have control. And with the right support and the right tools, your life gets to change. And I love that. I love the work you're doing, Miles. And thank you so much for taking the time to share.
It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, it's been a really...
As always.
Yeah. So where can people find out more about you if they want to come and work with you?
Well, you can find me on LinkedIn, and there's some bits stapled to my LinkedIn page, which are sort of quick introductions to what GTD is about. The company I work with is called Next Action Associates. All right, so you can track me down through there. If people just want to know a little bit more about what GTD is about, then there's the book. And the book is a good place to start, because it just gets people really thinking. It gets people thinking about, oh wow, they must. So there isn't a whole other way of sort of managing things. It's not the kind of book which tells you exactly how to do it, and that's not a kind of calculated sales thing or anything. It's just that the nature of GTD is that it's very personalized. Everyone sets it up differently, so it's not in the book. But the book is really good for getting people really thinking about some quite deep things, and about some things that they'll recognize. They'll sort of read the book, and it will really start them thinking about certain things that are often not the way they want them to be, about the way that they're working, and it starts to sort of tinkle a little bell. So there's actually there's another thing going on, and it might be accessible to you. So that's a good place to start. And it's like a tenner on Amazon. And the book's called GTD, Getting Things Done and the Art of Stress-Free Productivity. That's the one, and it's by David Allen. So that's a good place to start.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Miles.
My pleasure.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode. If this resonates with you, please use the like, subscribe and share buttons to help other people find their way here too. And please do go to www.heidimark.co.uk/the 1 minute mark with an E to join my mailing list and receive my free 1 minute life-changing audio practice.